this computer. Hi, everyone, and welcome aboard to what is the second session of our two-part uh, international workshop on qualitative research. So we had a really full day. I must have sounded almost like a lightning express going through a lot of material quickly, but knowing myself, if I were to invest a great deal of time in asking questions and asking the group to respond, we would be just sitting here 2 hours later with nothing done. So that was the best approach that I felt. At least I can give you an overview of the material, and then you can, depending upon your level of interest in what methodology, etc., then you can certainly go into the resources. I hope everybody knows that there is a resource folder, a very rich resource folder that I have offered to everyone for a period of 15 days after the webinars. Okay, so, and that contains an amazing wealth of information. And it's got some ebooks, it's got some wonderful papers, it's got some PowerPoint presentations, etc. So please take the time to download the material. I've received a number of downloads notifications from the box folder. So I know that it is being seen, but I would encourage more of you to actually see that because it will be very helpful to you. All right, that's one. Two, I just wanted to remind everyone that given the tremendous amount of material that we have here, which is humanly not possible to go through in a 2-hour session, and then also keep time for Q&A and questions, etc. So I'm offering myself for an hour-long session post the initial session. So what do I mean by that? So initial session for you guys will be from 7:30 to 9:30. We'll give a break of about a half an hour. For those that want to join, it's only optional. Those that want to join me for a session from 10 to 11 p.m. I know it's late, but at that segment, I will be covering fully developing effective research proposals. That's a critical piece. And unfortunately, that has to be kept after the initial session because there's a process that I'd follow. So those that are interested and would like to sit in for an hour-long session with me post this initial session, please feel free, and this is important, please feel free to indicate your interest in the chat box right now so that we know. I need at least a count of 10, maybe 15 people, because if it's just 2 or 3, it may not be worthwhile, okay? It's a very, I'm emphasizing very critical piece because a lot of times students struggle with how to develop an effective research proposal. Anything that you do, whether you're conducting research for an NGO, healthcare organization, wherever you're doing, you will be required to provide a research proposal. And if you're applying to a PhD program overseas, you're going to have to complete a research proposal, right? If you're applying for a grant, you'll have to prepare a research proposal. So research proposal, or if you're in a PhD program, you'll certainly have to defend a research proposal first, and before you can start collecting data and go on into the main study. So please feel free to indicate your interest in the chat box. Just say, yes, I'd be interested. And then you can use the exact same link from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. Indian Standard Time. We'll give 30 minutes as a break that you can just refresh. And if you want to grab a quick snack, grab a quick drink, get back in here at 10 p.m. from 10 to 11 your time. I promise you, I'll let everybody go at 11 p.m. Again, this is totally optional, all right? I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart because I feel very bad that there's so much to cover and so little time to do it in. So I figured, I checked with Pranati, and Pranati also felt it was a great idea to offer everybody an opportunity to attend, okay? So I see the chat box is lighting up. I've not seen the chat box yet. Pranati, when she joins, she'll look at the chat box and we can take take a look at that. All right. So exact same link that you use right now, you'll be using the same link at 10 p.m. and I will be on board with you. Okay. Now, thank you so much for your attention on that. Now, before I get started into the participatory action research, what I wanted to do is very customary for me to start day 2 with answering some questions, concerns, observations, comments that you folks had shared yesterday. Okay, so some of you, Giridhar Gopal, Dr. Preetam Mahajan, and also Dr. Shilpa have shared some comments, and Pranati was able to compress those comments and put them to me in a very cogent way. So what I'm going to do first, before we get started into the action research segment, is to actually go over the questions that were asked and what my suggestions and responses will be. I'm not using a prescriptive approach. So in other words, please be aware that when I give you an answer to that, it's not that I am the expert in that area. I'm sharing with you from my own observations, my own experiences of many, many years of doing this kind of work. So I'm not saying that mine is the gospel truth, okay? I'm only giving you my perspective. But usually the perspective that I'm sharing with you is robust and rigorous. And if you look it up and do further reading, you'll find that it is pretty consistent with what other authors are saying. So let's go with the first questions. And with excellent questions from Dr. Giridhar. I'm not sure if he's Dr. Giridhara Gopal or just doctor. So I'm just going to say Giridhara Gopal because there was no doctor in front of you. But if you're a doctor, then Dr. Gopal. All right. So first question was, what are the challenges in the implementation of a One Health program that includes collaboration between human, animal, and environmental factors or environmental sectors? Let me repeat the questions. What are the challenges in the implementation of a One Health program that includes collaboration between human, animal, and environmental sectors? So let me share this with you. When you're doing qualitative research, you're typically doing qualitative research with human subjects. Okay? So what do we mean? Your participants in qualitative research, unlike in quantitative research, you have respondents who are responding. In quantitative, as I said yesterday, you have a hands-off relationship with respondents. In qualitative, you have a hands-on relationship. So if I understand the question correctly, and I may not have understood the question, but from what I'm reading, it sounds as though you're asking me, how can you implement a health program that includes collaboration between human, animal, and environmental sectors? I would defer this, or I would probably emphasize here that if the animal part is something that raises my antenna here, okay, because in qualitative research, you don't do animal studies, you don't do animal testing, you don't do all of that stuff. That stuff is more the domain of a laboratory type setting, okay? And that mostly will fall within the purview of quantitative studies, okay? Where you have a team of health psychologists, you have a team of medical doctors, medical researchers, folks that have done the in MPH, the public health. Those are the kind of folks that will be involved in those kind of studies. Now, you may have, and I say this with guarded caution, you may have sometimes a study that is being conducted, which is mostly qualitative with human subjects, but then you could have an animal interaction or animal juxtaposition there in the study, which would be more quantitative. So you could be doing a mixed methods research. All right. So the mixed methods research would involve a qualitative piece on top of the quantitative piece. So the qualitative piece can talk about what human beings, how they are interacting with animals or whatever in their testing or whatever, right? Okay. So that would be my take on that. The second question he asked is, doesn't interpretation of participants' thoughts, emotions, etc., also depend on the researcher's standpoint and perspective to the problem? So I think what is being broadly or loosely referred to here is positionality, the worldview, the paradigmatic framework of a researcher, what the researcher is bringing to the study, right? In terms of what their views are, what their expertise lies in, what their interest lies in. So interpretation of participants' thoughts, emotions, etc., absolutely depends on that. But if you recall yesterday, I talked about a construct called bracketing. So before you embark on a study, you're bracketing or putting aside your own assumptions, thoughts, feelings, observations, etc., on the phenomena that you're researching. So in doing so, what you're doing is you're trying to ensure that your own worldview, own positionality, own ideology, own philosophy, or maybe even religious beliefs are not impinging the research. Because if you are a researcher who's, and I mean this with all due respect, if you're a researcher who has a real issue with LGBT, okay, with lesbians, gays, transgender, queer people, I would almost ask you not to do a study pertaining to LGBTQ. The reason for that is you're bringing such a baggage with you, all right, and that is inevitably going to impact your study. And it's going to corrupt your study because you're not going to be able to be fully present emotionally and psychologically with a participant from the gay LGBTQ community. They have very, very strong views about their own community and their own beliefs, right, about that. So those beliefs might clash. So I would ask you to stay away. So yes, so in this instance, your own views about LGBTQ, and I'm not saying Dr. Giridhar Gopal's views, I'm saying any researcher in general. So if you're bringing in some beliefs, some patterns, some really ideology that conflicts with your research, I would prefer that you don't get into that research because it's going to impact that research. Okay, so that. Number three, what is the ethical implication when we write qualitative research proposals? So I will be discussing more when I do my next segment at 10 o'clock, between 10 to 11, on the qualitative research proposals. I'll talk about that, but let me quickly answer this. So what is the ethical implication? We should anticipate one thing when we write, but we land up with something totally different. Yesterday, we talked about this. You're kind of like riding a horse, okay? And you're wanting to go in a certain direction. And I'm talking about qualitative research. You're mounted a horse, you know that you're going to be going in a different, it's in a slightly, in a particular direction. But then you find that the data is emerging, everything is happening, it's taking you in a different direction. Because you did not anticipate, despite your observations, despite your biases, despite your whatever assumptions, that participants have a totally different view of the phenomena that you originally envisaged. So it takes the horse in a different direction. Now, if you pull the horse reins back and say, no, I am only going to go in the direction of my study, you better not be in qualitative research. Qualitative research is a creative, very eclectic, very emergent form of research, where you're dealing with thoughts, feelings, emotions, ideas of people. So steer away from that. But if you have to make a change, and I call it like a mid-course correction. If you're doing a mid-course correction, make a change, but also state in your study, in your research project, that you started off wanting to do it this way, but the data are guiding you in a different way, in a different direction. So you're going to be taking a different direction, and state it openly and it's part of your flexibility statement that I talked about yesterday, which you typically comes up in the chapter 4 or chapter 5. Usually either in chapter 3, which is the research methodology and methods chapter, or chapter 5, and I'm talking about your dissertation, or chapter 5 would be findings, implications, and future considerations. Okay, so funding in the next question is, funding in quantitative research is specific with a hypothesis and burden definition. What if a qualitative research funding for HIV, we find some data that is against the non-beliefs of the funder? What do you mean by that? Funder is the sponsor of the research or whatever. If what research that you're doing is against the grain, against the beliefs or ideas or philosophy of the funder, of the sponsor, what do you do then? And then he cites an example of Pfizer. For example, Pfizer did not provide drugs and made money in Africa during the early HIV pandemic. Not only, my friend, Pfizer, but also Moderna. Moderna knew that they had an effective mRNA vaccine, which was very effective. It was rolled out here in the US. But Moderna kept the vaccine close to its vest. They would not offer it to third world countries. Okay, and when I say third world, I'm not including India in that. India is no longer considered a third world country. It is a highly developing emergent economy. But I'm talking about African nations, very poor countries. They would not offer that to them because they did not want to. They said, where are we going to get the money for this? So if you have the money, pay us the money, we'll give you the vaccine. There was a huge debate that occurred in that. Actually, their stocks fell for a period of time tremendously in the US because of that issue. But then again, Moderna has emerged because they have stayed abreast. They have always tried to keep one step ahead of Pfizer. But now I was not aware that Pfizer did not provide drugs and were making money in the process with those other countries in the HIV pandemic. Okay, Africa during the HIV pandemic. Okay, now I'm talking about the recent pandemic, which is the COVID, but Dr. Girdhar is talking about the HIV pandemic. So, but Pfizer is funding a qualitative research to study drug compliance in South Africa. How does one be politically correct? This is beyond my pay grade to answer this question. I don't know what their reasoning was, what their philosophy was, but if I filter it down to not Pfizer or Moderna, but any other sponsor who has some beliefs, they might not actually give you the funding. Or worse, they might pull the funding from you if they feel that the study is going in a direction that they did not envisage. So this is a very complicated, this is a very philosophical discussion. And I would like to steer away from that discussion because I'm not obviously have any authority to say what's going on with that. So the next question is it possible to share a framework like the one we shared for all types of research questions? So after the action research, I'm going to be discussing with you developing effective research questions. Very, very, very important segment. How do you develop a research question from scratch? So you have a research topic. How do you convert it into a phenomena? From phenomena, how do you convert it into a research question? How many research questions should you have? What does the research question guide you to do? All of that is coming next. That is, by the way, in our original seminar from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m. That will be covered today. Okay. But the one that I have from 10 to 11 is totally optional. And for that, you'll have to put it in the chat box. All right. So I'll be discussing in that research proposal segment different research questions and how research questions are leading you into different methodologies. Okay. So, or even if we could guide and share text on all of these sciences and theory. Now, I have provided you with a significant plethora of resources in that box folder. So I would encourage you to please dig into the box folder, download whatever stuff you have, but only I ask that you maintain the copyright on that folder. Okay. It's not my copyright, but I have obviously gotten permission from some of the authors to share the work with you all. So please honor that. Don't share that randomly and openly with everybody. Use it for your own university, your own consumption, your own little research group or teaching group. That's fine. Okay. So go into those resources and you'll find plenty of resources there. As a matter of fact, I think I put Creswell's book also on qualitative research, mixed methods and all that there. Or even if you can write. So does phenomenology have a third level wherein there's a lens of the policy making reading the research? So yesterday, if you remember, I talked about the triple hermeneutic. The double hermeneutic means that the researcher, if you're doing research, your researcher's making sense of a participant who's making sense of phenomena. So when you're interviewing participants, they are reflecting, they're thinking about, they're experiencing a certain phenomena. And you as the researcher are looking at the phenomena through the lens of the participant. So you have your own lens, but through your lens, you're looking at the participant. And not just looking at the participant per se, but really looking at the participant and how the participant is making sense of a phenomenon. So there's a double layer. It's a double dual lens. So we call it double hermeneutic or double interpretation. Okay. So enough about that. Is there a tool that shows what kind of researcher I am and my positionality? Usually these items that you're talking about when you talk about tools and positionality and all of that stuff, really, you're talking about more the quantitative realm, okay? It's typically not discussed in qualitative. In qualitative, yes, it is important to understand limitations, delimitations. All of you know what limitations and delimitations are. Limitations are constraints that are imposed that on which you do not have any control. Okay, the timeline, the project scope, the project costs, the funding, the grants, those are things you cannot control. They are given to you. So those are the limitations that are exposed or imposed on you from the outside. However, there are delimitations. There are things that you can control in the design, how you choose the participants, what kind of questions you're going to have. So those are some of the delimitations. So in addition to positionality, which is important, you're also very, very required in qualitative research to understand limitations and delimitations. You'll be asked what are the limitations and delimitations, okay? So is there a tool? I would like to stay away from tools and strategies on how to deal, because that is beyond the scope of this workshop, okay? But certainly you can find tools that will help you understand what kind of a researcher you are, what ideologies you're bringing, what biases you're bringing. I'm sure there are tools out there. If you look up on the internet, you can certainly find them. But a cross-sectional assessment at the time of study can be useful, and I agree to your point in individuals. So he agrees to my last point. Now he says grounded theory has hypothesis because it has causality. No, it doesn't have hypothesis because it has causality. It has hypothesis because it is trying to develop a new theory or refine an existing theory. So you start out with a hypothesis, because if you all know about grounded research or grounded theory, in grounded theory, you do not do chapter 2. You do not do a exhaustive literature review before you start to do the data collection. In other forms of research, you do a literature review. Even if you're writing a mini project report, you are required to do an introduction, problem statement, a small literature review of what literature is available there, what conversations are happening in the academy, right? But in grounded theory, that literature review comes at the very end. What do I mean by that? So when you're trying to explore a new theory, trying to develop a new theory, right? You're going to be called upon, you have to start with some sort of a hypothesis there, right? So a theory about whatever, I mean, that you may have in your mind many of you are medical professionals, so you may have some ideas, some notions, some constructs about medical breakthroughs of what can be done. A lot of advancements are happening in India right now as we speak. Some of the finest brains from India are working in American corporations, in American pharmaceutical companies, including some of my own relatives who are in high-placed scientist positions within the pharmaceutical sector. So if you have to start with some sort of a hypothesis, some sort of a notion on what it is that you are going to be researching, okay? And then based on that, you develop some sort of a hypothesis, and causality does come as a very important factor in grounded theory, because in grounded theory, you're saying that this is the theory that you're finding. So one thing is causing another thing. So, you know, there's a direct variable, indirect variable, and a confounding variable, okay? So I have the Creswell book that I think I have already uploaded to the box folder. If not, I will go ahead and upload that book. And it's a very easy read. Go into the Creswell book, read up on how this is done about the variables, right? And all of you, these are very, incidentally, when you talk variables, you're really talking about quantitative research. And so in the segment on mixed methods research, you'll find all of this. It's really exciting. You'll also find how theory is applied in quantitative, how theory is applied in qualitative, to what extent should theory come, and whether it should come first or it should come last. All of that stuff you should be reading up. All right. So now let me go into Dr. Preetham Mahajan's Q&A. So the first one is it possible to map some specific methods with purpose of study? For example, for descriptive or analytical, can one say phenomenology, grounded theory, respectively, are used? Are there more? There are certainly more. I would encourage you to look through the Carla Willig's book, which is already in the box folder that I provided. Excellent resource for you. I would also look into the Creswell book for answers to your questions. Yes, there are maps and there are diagrams and all that. Excellent, excellent work. Creswell is almost like the Bible of qualitative research, okay? John Creswell. And I think John and his son have both written, or two Creswells have written, Creswell and Creswell. How does one capture experience unless expressed? Okay, so obviously, if the experience is not expressed, how can you capture it? So therefore, when you're interviewing participants, you're trying to capture that experience as closely as possible to the phenomenon. Is there a way to factor body language and predict experience? Now, yes, we do in qualitative research pay special attention to body language, all right, paralinguistic cues as we call them, right? So if I was sitting face to face with you in a classroom, I could see your body language, you could see my body language. But now here in a video communication, that's very limited because the paralinguistic cues are muted. The spatial indicators are made. What do I mean by spatial indicators? Spatial indicators meaning if I'm at the head of a classroom, right, like your professors are, they are there because they're supposed to be the experts in their field. They're at the head of the class. So that class setting, right, whether it's an amphitheater setting or a direct setting block to professor setting, because of the spatial indicators, because of the distance between you and the professor, there is automatically psychologically some notions are formed about power and authority. All right. So body language in phenomenology, especially in phenomenology, is important because we also are looking at textual cues. We're looking at what the person is saying. Yesterday, I was talking about the participant saying, yes, I agree, I don't agree, or they're shaking their head, nodding their head, things of that nature, okay? So should we indulge in judging? I would not use the word judging, assessing, evaluating at all when you're doing phenomenology, okay? or even in grounded theory, you have to remain very open to whatever is emerging out there. Okay. So I would steer away, Dr. Mahajan, from using the expression judging, right? And if they're concealing their experience, yes, you can have some notions, you can have some ideas that they might be concealing, right? What you're trying to say, they're not being open, they're not being forthright with you. So what do you then do? Well, you don't say to them that, hey, I think you're really concealing something. You're not being open with me. Usually, because they would shut down if you were to say that, or they would be offended. So I would say, I was just thinking about what I asked you and some of the answers that you were giving me. Let me ask you a question. And then you take them in the direction that you want to go in, right? To explore more, not to change the topic, not to hijack the conversation, but really to explore more, to go in depth with them. Okay. So how do we ensure quality of data in such instances? So data that are extracted, collected, analyzed in qualitative research, right, are non-numeric data, right? So when you say quality of data, the quality of data, my understanding is if you're using rigor and if you're using a preset approach and if you're using high ethical considerations, right, and developing trust, those are the issues that come into the quality of data, not a sham type of research. You start imagining a transcript, write a transcript, whether you've done the interview or not. I've seen some people, unfortunately, it really pains my heart to see they may do makeup research. So they were required to do 10 interviews. They could only do 6 interviews. The last 4 interviews they made up. That's awful. That is a terrible way of doing research because you're not being true to yourself. Garbage in, garbage out. All right. So remain very cognizant of your ethical considerations, your epistemological considerations, right? Your axiological considerations, and remain true to what you do. If you remain true to your project and remain truthful, honest, and with full integrity, that's what contributes to quality. So since IPA helps analyze, how can you not theorize? Okay, so here's always a dilemma that people will ask. Okay, so whether you're doing IPA or you're doing descriptive phenomenology or other forms of hermeneutic phenomenology, interpretive phenomenology, where is the, I mean, are we not theorizing? So by theorizing, if you mean making sense of something, that's different from latching a theory on that. So for instance, if you're talking to somebody about, can you tell me about your experiences of, I'm just taking an example of experiences of living in a joint family household, right? Now, of course, nowadays, most people are not in joint families. Earlier, it was joint family. I grew up when I was very young into a joint family. Everybody in that vicinity would be living together, my uncles, aunts, everybody together. There were some good things and some not so great things because you didn't have your privacy as your individual family unit, but you had the support of a joint family, right? But in a joint family system, there were also some emotional and sexual abuses that happened. Not in my family, fortunately, but I've heard of other families where they were victimized. The young girls were victimized by uncles, or in some cases, some aunts really abused some young boys within the same family. And they were too scared to speak up. So you have to be very careful about this aspect, okay? So the quality of data and the research and the integrity has to be in the context that you're doing the research. And we had talked about context yesterday. So that was enough about that. It is the right thing that RQ should be preceded before methodologies. How should the informed consent format for qualitative research be? So qualitative research, I have a format for informed consent. Feel free to email me privately and I'll send you a copy of my own informed consent for my own doctoral study. It's a standard format. Of course, when I say standard, it's a standard template, but in which the kind of phenomena you're researching, what you're researching, how you're going to go about it, all of that stuff, what permissions about safety, security of data, all of that goes into that. So it's a standard, but you have to have that informed consent form before that. I'm doing a performance assessment of a package, and this is Dr. Venkatesh, by the way, I forgot to mention. I'm doing a performance assessment of a package strategy of a health program from the healthcare providers and patients' perspective. Here, my query is, what challenges do the provider and patients face in the strategy of a program working or not? This is fertile question for action research. And as I get into action research, we will discuss how action research and participatory action research are really effective tools for making changes in systems. And I know a lot of you are medical professionals from public health, public policy, where you are required to go in and make changes in a health system or bring about some transformation in the way people perceive so things of that nature. So action research will be the ideal one to do about it. I'll talk about that. So Dr. Bilimale had a question. Qualitative research questions inside quantitative study do qualitative research questions inside a quantitative study need the same rigor? So what I'm understanding is, when you set up a quantitative study, you obviously have to have a very rigorous, you have to do a lot of reading, hypothesizing before you set up a research question. A hypothesis 1, hypothesis 2, hypothesis 3. Do you go through the same rigor with qualitative research questions? Qualitative research questions are more, the problem is sometimes, Dr. Bilimale, when students are approaching qualitative research, or even unfortunately, when some faculty members are advising students on qualitative research, they seem to think that qualitative research doesn't have that rigor, doesn't have that scientific approach, because they don't see numeric data. They see non-numeric. So how can you put a value on thoughts, feelings, observations, emotions? Because two people you're talking to will have two different approaches to that. So there's some legitimacy to this. There's some credibility to that. However, when we talk about rigor, we talk about rigor in a different way in qualitative. In qualitative, there's a whole process of developing a research question. And in my segment on research questions following the research action research, I'll be discussing some of that. So let me quickly get through this. Lastly, I have Dr. Shilpa, who asks, can you explain inductive and deductive concepts with some more explanation? All right, so I will be hopefully covering that a little bit more in my segments today. All right, what is inductive, what is deductive? If you attend my segment after this initial segment at 10 o'clock, I will be going into some more detail on that. But it is beyond the scope of this workshop to really go into drill down into details of what is an inductive approach and what is a deductive approach. Okay, so so please bear with me. If you have questions related to this a little bit more, you can certainly contact me offline, and I'll be happy to work with you on that. Okay, so just in the interest of time, I have to move on. So okay, so enough said about that. So I wanted to first cover this, and I know we've taken 45 minutes to do this, but this was, folks, very important, because what good is a workshop if the questions that were raised in the previous segment or in yesterday have not been addressed? Typically, you will attend these workshops when all of these questions that come up in chats, the facilitator is going to say, okay, let's discuss that in the break, or let's discuss that after the program. Those are never discussed, unfortunately. So I did not want to be guilty of that. So I made sure that I told Pranati to pull these off. She did an excellent job. She's doing an amazing job in the back room. And we wanted to make sure that these are covered. Okay. So I don't know if Pranati has been able to join yet or not. But Pranati, if you're here, send me a message and I'll make you the co-host. Okay, I don't see. Let me just go. Give me 1 second, folks. Just give me. Oh, Pranati is here. Okay, good. Okay, make co-host. All right. Okay, Pranati is the co-host. All right, folks. So now we're all set.
Thank you,
So she
Dr.
was
Behel.
okay. Good, excellent. Welcome aboard. So now what I'm going to be talking about is participatory action research. Now, as I was mentioning, a lot of you folks will be called upon, and you may not know this, but already the interventions that you're making in a health system, in a community medicine system, in public health, are already in the nature of action research. You may not understand this, but when you see this workshop, when you go through the slides, you'll notice what I'm talking about. So the word participatory actually enhances action research as a methodology. And let's talk about that. So what is action research? Okay. So what is action research? What is participatory action research? How does participatory action research, or PAR as the acronym, fit into the realm of qualitative research? Who is the research directed to? What is the critical role and involvement of participants such as employees, managers, leaders, etc., in such a research setting? And what is the value, informal and formal value, of contracting? So again, what is action research? What is participatory action research? How does PAR fit into the realm of qualitative research? Who is the research directed to? It's a very important question. Because every time you're doing research, it is directed to some situation, problem, system, or other, or community. What is the critical role and involvement of participants such as employees, managers, leaders, etc.? Contracting, informal and formal. Do we have to have contracting before you go into a system with the idea to change the system? Okay. All right. So the next one slide is, what is action research? Okay. So action research is about reflection in action, meaning that you're reflecting on the very process of reflection. It's a little weird concept to think about, but reflection in action is, so if you are a medical professional, if you are a public health worker, and you are going into a system and you're reflecting what is happening in the system, your gaze is outwards. You're seeing how are people interacting, what is going on, is everything being done as per the procedures, are doctors using their interventions, their diagnoses, or whatever properly. So if you're looking at that, your gaze is outward. So in action research, as much as your gaze is outward, your gaze should also be inward. So you reflect on the process of reflection, meaning you're reflecting on your own thoughts about the system. So in other words, you're almost as though, I'll give you the analogy of, it's the observing ego, like almost, have you always seen a play when you're in the audience, right? And you're seeing an act being enacted on stage, there are actors, players, whatever, right? And if you think about yourself being on stage as an actor, but also being part of the audience as a spectator, how would that feel? So you can imagine yourself on stage, watching yourself from the audience as you're enacting certain roles. And it's called, in very loose terms, we call it acute awareness. So you have to be, as a researcher, very aware of what you're reflecting and how that reflection is impacting you. Kind of like reflexivity, the researcher's positionality, in a sense. What are you bringing into this, right? And the interventions that you're making, the processes that you're unfolding, how are you reflecting on those? All action research involves a social process within a social practice. Action research is about community, is about society, is about sociality or social networks. It is a practice changing practice. What do I mean by that? So you are not going as an disinterested observer. You're going with disinterested observer as they're like almost like a monitor who goes ahead and sees what's going on, then comes back and writes a report. That's not what an action researcher does. The word action and research, think about that. You're a researcher involved in action. And you are not only unfolding that action or implementing that action, but also reflecting on that implementation. So it is a practice changing. Practice meaning it's whatever the practices, systems are in place, you are there to change that, to transform that. Okay? Just to be clear. It's about learning to do something by doing it rather than simply talking about it. That's how the word action was added to the expression. So it's not, you're not a prescriptive kind of person saying, oh, do this, do that, do that, do that, right? Or talking about it, making suggestions, but not actually doing anything about it. That's not your role. Your role, so you're not a detective in the field, just seeing what is happening there, making notes of all the facts and data, and then doing nothing about it. You're there to make a change in the system. You're there to transform the system. You're there to impact the system. It is a theory and practice developed by Kurt Lewin, a famous psychologist, very, very important name in this field. Kurt Lewin in 1944. There is nothing so practical as a good theory. Wonderful expression. This has been used like a million times, by the way. By Lewin, 1951, page 169, and I have the reference, I think, at the end of it. Okay. So let's see. So now what is practice? So we were talking about action research. Now, what is participatory action research? What is this word participatory? I say participatory, folks. It's just because my American expression, but it is participatory or participatory or whatever, however you say it. But it comes from participation, right? Participation. So what is this participation we are talking about? Why not just action research? Because it meets all the elements of action research. The primary purpose of PAR is to bring about a change in social practices. Read this very carefully, folks. The primary purpose of PAR is participatory action research, by the way, is to bring about a change in the social practices. Social practice of what? Of a community, of a system. Whether it's a health system or governmental organization or wherever you're working as a researcher. Practices within a social system, including the practice of doing research. So you are researching while making recommendations. So you're researching the system, you're investigating, exploring all of that good stuff that comes with research, including the practice of doing research and making a change in the process, making some transformation in the process. In contrast to action research, which tends to be researcher driven, very careful. Action research is driven by the researcher. The researcher is king. The researcher is the person, the go-to person. On the other side is the client, the NGO, the community medicine client, the system that you're working with. They bring you in as the researcher. You are the boss. In contrast to action research, which tends to be researcher driven by external experts. So external experts, doctors, public health experts, whoever going into a system to make a change, they are the go-to people. They are the experts in their area. PAR is a significant departure from the traditional mindset. So when you're using a participatory action researcher and not an action researcher per se, you are using a different philosophy. And I'm going to get into that philosophy right now. And by the way, more and more organizations are shifting towards recruiting participatory action researchers. Right? Because simple action research does not prove to be as effective. And I'll explain the reason why. You probably already know what I'm talking about. So, two important features of PAR, okay? Right? So, people living and working in certain systems, such as employees, are actively involved in all aspects of the research. So, all employees, stakeholders, everybody in a system, whether it's an NGO or it's a community organization or it's whatever company that you're going to, they're all actively, when I say all employees, not necessarily everybody so whoever the company designates to be part of that participatory action research will be involved in making that change. The research conducted by participants is oriented to making significant changes and improvements to the prevailing practice by the participants themselves. Now let's look at that for a second. So unlike in action research, where experts are coming in, they're exploring, they're talking to people, they're interviewing people, they're watching, they're sitting in meetings, all of that, and then they produce a report. But the people that are affected by the change are not part of that change, right? Other than maybe the president of the company or the CEO, the vice president, or the HR person who may be involved. But other folks are not part of the change. The research conducted by participants is oriented to making significant changes and improvements to the prevailing practices by participants themselves. So you as participants or stakeholders or employees are now involved with the researchers in bringing about the change. Very important distinction. Okay? What makes PAR so unique? Let's look at that. So because participants, when I say participants are people who are working inside. So when I use participants, these are the ones that are one party, and researchers are the so-called experts, right? So don't confuse the two. So when I say participants are insiders who own the discourse. There is more buy-in. They are more likely to take your advice, right? If they are part of the change, right? So when somebody is involved in something, they are more likely to be receptive to that change, receptive to your idea, receptive to your notion. Despite the belief that insiders cannot see things objectively, okay, sometimes people say, you are part of the system. So because you're day in and day out, you're working as part of the system, you cannot look at the system objectively with a critical lens. While part of that is true, because you're day in and day out working, so you take it for granted that this is my company, this is my organization that I'm working with. you're not able to see with a great deal of acuity what's really happening, the minutia of the day-to-day things that are happening. It is found that they can act and reflect in a disinterested manner because they have access to the inner working of the system and its nuance. So despite the belief that insiders cannot see things objectively, it is discovered that they can act and reflect in a disinterested manner. Now, can everybody do that? The answer is no. So the CEO of the company or the head of the government department or whoever that is sponsoring, that is bringing in the participatory action researchers, they are identifying, they're delegating their own representatives who they feel can look at the system objectively. So these representatives are their employees. So the employees are selected to work with the research team, the external folks, to bring about change in the system. And these representatives are usually the unspoken heroes in the company. They're really the charismatic leaders. You know, in every organization, there are charismatic leaders, right? Who are charismatic, who are leaders, not by virtue of the position, but by virtue of the way they are. They're good human beings, they're compassionate, they're understanding, they're collaborative, they are looking out for you. So those people have a so finely tuned lens through which they can work with and look at this objectively. So participatory action research must work together as a research team conducting a study. Okay, first column right here. So you're part of the research team. So the research team, the researchers and employees together. Researcher would be just one member of the team and would have to relinquish some power. So when the researcher is going in and doing research, I'm talking about a participatory action researcher, they have to relinquish some power. You have to acknowledge that there are other leaders and those leaders exist within the organization. So you work in collaboration with them, conducted by teachers, administrators, counselors, coaches, and other professionals to solve very specific problems. So the researcher goes in and collaborates to solve the problem. You just don't bring a participatory action research team and pay them lakhs and lakhs of rupees just because it looks good. There are some specific problems occurring in the company or occurring in the health system or occurring in community medicine that you're brought in to solve, or in a university system. There may be some real problems. The strategy is to work in a complementary way, in a paradoxically bilateral way, such that each person contributes to the whole. Okay, so every person, so it's not that the researchers are on one side and these other folks, employees are on the other side and they have contradictory objectives. No, objective is a common objective. What is the common objective? That based on this project, we are here to make changes or solve a particular problem. Example, group of teachers studying classroom discipline problems. So this is just an example of that. 5 things only PAR can accomplish. Okay. Now, practitioners, researchers, and participants can co-develop ways to understand problems. Now, is anybody seeing that this is a unique form of qualitative research here you talked about yesterday, in the form of IPA phenomenology, where researchers and participants are collaborating in the research. They're working together to develop, they're co-creating knowledge. So in this case, they're co-creating solutions, interventions that are effective. They can speak a shared language, right? If you're part of a PAR team, they can mutually agree on actions and interactions in the practice. They can together develop communities of practice. The most critical feature of PAR is to question one's interventions and outcomes while recommending suitable changes. What do we mean by that? Usually what happens is if there's an action researcher, not PAR, but just a simple action researcher, they provide a report. And that report is like the gospel truth. It's done, all the statistical data, this, that. And usually the company just accepts that as the report of an expert. Like when you go to a doctor and you require surgery, the doctor is suggesting that this thing that has to be done, and you've got, unfortunately, colon cancer, and the polyps were removed, they did the biopsy, they found whatever, malignancy. So I'm recommending such and such. You don't question the doctor, right? Because the doctor is the expert. By virtue of the doctor's training, education, experiences, diagnosis, you take the doctor's advice. You don't question, no, doctor, how did you say that? You don't, do you ever question the lab that is doing a cholesterol check and saying your LDL is 125 or 140 and it should be below 100? You don't say, oh, show me how you did it. You have trust in the lab, right? So likewise, if it's just an action researcher, the report is sent, they don't question the report. But if you're a part of a PAR, a participatory action research team, you're working collaboratively and you can question the research team and ask them to reflect on why they are suggesting this. So if there's something they feel irrational, they, meaning the employees that are part of that team, they can ask a question. If it is unsustainable, because they know they've been part of this organization for 20 years, they think it's unsustainable, it's impractical, it's not going to work, or unjust, that it is going to impact certain employees at the expense of others. So for instance, if this action research team or participatory action research team comes up with a solution that the company has become too top heavy, right? And we have to get rid of 20% of the employees of the company. You have to do the downsizing, let them go, fire them. But if it is an unjust firing where the CEO's henchmen, all the top level people are going to be retained, while some of the people that they were trying to get rid of because who don't agree with you, you're trying to shaft them. So it is unjust, right? So this team that is part of the organization can question the researchers and say, can you give me a reasoning and a rationale for why 20% people have to be cut from the organization? So this is an important aspect of this, very, very critical aspect of this. So this is perhaps one of the most critical features, most redeeming features of PAR. Case study included. We don't have the time to go through that. So I'm going to shift gears and go into developing research questions. But before I do that, and we are doing okay for time today, I wanted to open this out just for a quick breather, both for myself and for you, and to ask if you have any questions, raise your hand, and we'll be happy to take some questions on the previous segment, action research. And if you have some questions like you did yesterday, please also put them in the chat box. So if you're too shy to ask a question, you can put it in the chat box. But I think Girdhar Gopal has a question, right, Pranati?
Yes, Dr. Bell, you're right. Giridhar Gopal has raised his hand.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead, Girdhar? Girdhar, you'll have to unmute yourself.
They're unable to mute themselves. I think we'll have to allow them to unmute themselves.
Oh, do I have to allow them?
Yes.
I don't see
If
the,
you, 1 second, let me just request the remote control option from you and I can take it
okay,
forward from there.
okay, requesting remote control. Okay, go ahead.
Great.
Zoom would like to control this computer using accessible features. Open set network settings.
Okay, no, this has given me control of the screen. Giridhar, please allow me a second.
Yeah.
Yes, here.
Yeah, thanks, Pranati. Thanks, Dr. Bell.
No
Uh,
worries.
Okay, thank you.
so,
So
yeah,
Pranati,
so
is this going to be standard now? You change the setting, right?
I've changed the setting. I've given you back the remote control, and I can unmute people now.
Okay, okay, okay. No, what I was meaning was for future sessions, is this now standard? They can unmute themselves?
No. So there is some setting that has been enabled today, which
Okay.
does not allow participants to unmute themselves.
Okay, so
So
at the end of this session, you'll have to tell me how to do that because I have another session coming up after that, right?
sure, sure, sure. I'll do that.
Okay, okay,
I'll be
good.
there with
Okay.
you from 10 to 11 as well. Don't worry.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm sorry that it's going to be taking a part of your night, but I
No,
would
no.
appreciate that. Okay,
I'd
okay,
absolutely be there. Don't worry.
okay. Because it was optional. Okay, I didn't mean. Okay, so go ahead, Girdhar, please.
yeah, thanks, Dr. Bell. So you said that the participatory action research is something where the researcher goes into an organizational system and works with the uh, people there, right? Should it
Yes.
always be just the social side of it, wherein the researcher understands all the social dynamics within the system and tries to address that? Or it could also be other elements that a researcher finds that, hey, this needs to be changed and we need to change it. This is the first question. The second
Okay.
question I had was, what if there is a very, some kind of a participant in that organization who is too powerful for a researcher to handle? So that
Hmm.
participant can drive the entire, intervention or anything towards the side he or she finds it right. And,
Right.
they define what's rational, they define what's sustainable, they define what's unjust. So if that's the
Okay.
case, how can a PAR work?
Okay. So your first question was, what was that? Your first question was just that you had just asked me.
Does it always
Uh,
look only into the soft elements like social
okay. No.
interaction?
Okay. No. 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 So it can be you have an operating agreement with the company, right? That these are the areas that we're going to look at. So when I say social settings, didn't mean that within social it's only soft skills, right?
Okay.
It can also be hard skills. It could be technical functional skills that are lacking. And if your
Right.
expert team is coming in to look at those, then you have the authority vested in you by the CEO or by the HR department to go ahead and make those changes or go ahead and make those recommendations. So that is the first point. Second point is about, and a very interesting thing that does happen, there are distractors within every organization. There'll be ones that I was going to use a word which I'm going to refrain from doing, but they were always out there to somehow derail the task. Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever you say, you can say you can say the gospel truth and they will disagree with you. Or they will bring about, because they're so powerful in the organization and by virtue of their experience or expertise or whatever, that they'll say, this is all crap. So your question is, how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
Right? How do you deal with that? Because they're obviously trying to derail your work. You're trying to make some changes and you don't have, of course, we all know that what we don't want to have is all congruence, all agreement. Everybody's agreeing with everybody else. That's not a good organization. There are some questions that need to be asked. But those questions have to be objective. They have to be judicious. But if you have such a person, it's like kind of like the problem child. They're not children, but they're kind of like, I call them the problem child because children sometimes act out. So if they're acting out most of the time like this, how do you go about and do that? Okay. So it is a skill. It's your own individual propensity to deal with such behavior. All right. And And in some cases, you may actually have to go to the HR department and ask them to tell that employee to lay off. Or if that employee is inadvertently part of the team, then you have to let that employee go from the team. Of course, that can pose other problems too, because then other people are going to say, see, you fired that employee. So unfortunately, I cannot get into too much detail about this. Maybe at a
So does
different
this
time.
mean that, as a researcher, my power and my stance also becomes very crucial when I'm dealing with, such powerful leaders or bureaucrats? So I'm just giving an example. I want to do a participatory action research, let's say in a TB program in action happening in a district or a state.
Yeah.
Now, it'll always be an IAS officer or some people with 25, 30 years who have been worked in, complete bureaucratic environment. Now, I'm just in my 30s. So if I go there and try to find, hey, this is the thing that is happening, this is the thing that needs to be done, why would he have to listen to me?
Okay. Okay. So just in the interest of time, I would ask that either we can take this offline and discuss this separately, or at a different time, because this is obviously a very isolated case involving you per se, right? I mean, it's not something that happens to everybody, but it is certainly something that is noteworthy that needs to be addressed. Okay, so I will try to at some point discuss with you about this, how I've handled it, or how I've tried to handle it. And there is no one size fits all. Okay, there is no one approach that's going to be the best approach. There are many different approaches that you can use. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Thank you.
So does anybody have another? I think somebody had raised their hand. Pranati, Kailashi,
Yes.
or
Yes, I have asked them to unmute themselves.
okay, go ahead.
Dr. Behelmi, I also request you to make Dr. Anil S. Bilimali the host as well. They
Yes, I
texted
did.
me about it.
I did. He's the host.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, that was the first thing I did when I joined the meeting.
They're not one of the co-hosts from what I can see, and I cannot make them.
Okay, I don't know how it got unhosted. I made him the co-host also. That was the first thing before you had joined. I did it with Dr. Bilimale. Dr. Bilimale, you should be the co-host. Yes.
So Behel had connectivity issues. So when I logged off, the co-hosting went off.
Okay. Because that was the first thing I did.
So, and with respect to the people unmuting themselves, there is a security feature. There is a security button. When you click on that, there is an option unmute themselves. So I had actually disabled it when your session started, because many people sometimes unknowingly they
because I didn't think that was a something that I had to do in the settings. They should have the option always to unmute themselves.
No, but
So
I did that. Yeah, I did that too, when you started the training, but then I logged off, and then when I came back, I was not co-host.
I see that in the participant panel, mute all and unmute all. Okay. So are they all unmuted now? I mean, in the sense that, do they have the option to unmute?
They can unmute themselves. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for clarifying. Okay.
I could not do that because I was not co-host, and I could not unmute.
Okay. Challenges of technology. All right. As long as we can have it figured out, that's fine. All right, good. So let's go on. So who had the hand on, Pranati?
They're unmuted. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Well, this is Dr. Kali Selvi. So we are having wonderful lectures for the past 2 days. Thanks for that. And my interest is to understand how to decide whether to go for action research approach or participatory action research approach. So let me give an example.
Sure.
So for example, if my interest is to understand whether is it feasible to implement a package of intervention in an industrial settings, and to understand what are the implementation challenges in implementing those package of interventions. If that was my interest, so whether to go ahead with action research or the participatory action research. So if I decide either of those things, then how do I justify these approaches?
Okay, so great question. Did everybody hear that question? So when to use action research and when not to use action research, or when to use participatory action research? So my take on that would be, it is not like one standard answer. It's not, I don't want to give you a boilerplate answer. It depends on the situation. It depends on the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? In this case, I mean, the company or the sponsor of the research, right? So they're bringing you in, correct, as the expert, right, to make those changes, to figure out what's going on. And if those changes, because sometimes you might say, I'm me, Pranati, Anil, we will all be part of the action research team coming into the organization. So please authorize us to this. But we would also like a buy-in from like some employees from your organization to join our team. They might say, no, we don't want that. We want an unbiased, totally objective approach, right? As you see the organization. Okay, let me tell you, there are many organizations that are not that democratic, because participatory action research, my friends, is a democratic process. I think you'll all agree. That is what democracy is, right? Everybody's part of it. There is, if action research can be seen by some employees, some stakeholders within the organization as too autocratic. In other words, they are the ones that are making all the changes. They're the one making recommendations. And it does happen, by the way. So it has to be seen as case by case, how we go about this. I don't know if that answers your question.
So if I understood it correctly, so the approaches is driven by the feasibility rather than the research questions. So am I right?
Absolutely right, 100%. And you use the exact word, the feasibility, or the scope of the project. What is the scope of the project? Is the scope of the project just to bring a objective report, or is the scope of the project is to create buy-in within an organization?
Thank
So
you,
in
Dr.
other words, it's also a problem statement. What is the problem statement? What is the pain they're experiencing? Because you're there to help with the pain. Sometimes they want to produce a report for the government because they're looking, the government is asking this organization, please provide a report of what's going on. So that report is done by the experts without the democratic involvement of the employees. Okay, so enough of that. Anybody else real quick, because I have to move fast.
Yes, we have, maybe this is the last question we can take right now.
Yes,
Dr.
last
Rishit
question.
Mehta, I've asked you to unmute yourself. Please go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I had, we were earlier discussing that a company, suppose Pfizer or some other COVID vaccination company, were doing qualitative research after in their trial phase.
Yes.
So what I was thinking about was conflict of interest. One, this qualitative research has no barriers to biases. So how do we justify if any, actually lot of conflict of interest is going to be? So how does qualitative research address that, justify that?
I didn't catch your voice is breaking up, unfortunately, sir. So I didn't catch that. But if you would be so kind as to put it in the chat box, we will try to address it later. Okay? Because I cannot catch that. Your voice is totally breaking up for me. Is that okay? All right. Okay, so I'm assuming that the gentleman will do that. So let me get into developing research. One of the things that I find which is extremely important in any kind of research is to have a solid, rigorous, robust research question. Without a good research question, whether you're doing action research or whatever form of research you're doing, you have to have a good action or a good research question, or RQ as we put it, right? So what is a research question? Let's first look at what a research question is not. Because before we understand what is a research question, let's understand what it is not. To dispel some myths, to dispel some misunderstandings that researchers have about research question. So let's look at what it is not. It is not the study title. A lot of people say, I asked the student, so what is your research question? They give me a deer in the headlights look. So what do you mean? The title of my study is Determinants of Human Behavior in such and such system. I said, but that is the title of your study. What is your research question? Can you give me some time to think about it? Okay. So your research title is not your research question. Your research topic is not your research question. So your research topic may be something that you're wanting to research, but that is not your research question. The research question has a very specific role. It is not your research phenomena. So it is not the study title. It is not the research topic. It is not the research phenomena. You all understand research phenomena. So you remember we were yesterday talking about emotional abuse and what it is like for single parent households to have an unwed mother raising a child in a single family household, or what is it like for an engaged employee working in a predominantly virtual organization. So if you're talking about employee engagement, that is a research phenomenon. But is employee engagement your research question? No, it's not. So what is this thing called a research question? Let's look at that. So research focus on the major. So now I'm showing you how to extract a research question from a very broad-based realm. So focus on the major research issue. The research issue is your central phenomena or the research phenomena. So like I was just talking about 2 minutes ago about employee engagement, right? Okay. Or I'm just going to take another one that is coming up pretty often from the students that I'm currently guiding. One of them is doing the increasing infidelity in marriage. So marital infidelity, cheating on the spouse, having a relationship while you're already committed with somebody and you're having a relationship on the side, because with the advent of social, and I'm nothing against social media, I'm one of the biggest fans of social media, but within social media, it has enabled alliances and quick relationships to form, which people think are relationships, but they are really just alliances. And so it has enabled people to get in touch with people that they would have otherwise not been able to. So I'm just going to take an example. If the phenomena that you're researching is marital infidelity, so how do we go with this marital infidelity? I just made it up because it's one of the very contemporary ones that I'm looking at with one of my students. Okay. So first what you do is you develop a purpose statement. What is a purpose statement? The purpose of this study will be to, right? We have the fill in the blank. The purpose of this study will be to understand the nuances, dynamics of marital infidelity, or to explore in depth marital infidelity, or to develop an understanding. See, I'm looking at this: explore, develop, discover. Develop an understanding of marital infidelity, or to discover what are some of the other challenges that are occurring in society because of this increasing marital infidelity. So this is the purpose of the study. But is the purpose of the study the research question? No, it's not. So the purpose of this study will be to understand whatever marital and the central phenomena to be studied. So the central phenomena, once again, is marital infidelity, which is central phenomena, is a research phenomenon. Right? So just fill in the blanks. So see my cursor? If you understand marital infidelity, right? The central phenomena of marital infidelity, again, you enter that here, to be studied for how many participants, such as the individual, group, or organization. So if the earlier lady that had questioned me about the action research, so if you're doing something for a group, individual, or organization, how many participants are you looking at? Who are the participants? Who are the stakeholders? Such and such as the individual, group, or organization at what is the research site? So are you going to be researching at XYZ organization, XYZ NGO, government organization, community medicine site, or whatever, right? You have to identify the site. At this stage in the research, the marital infidelity phenomena will be defined as, okay, now let me just pause here. Why do we have to go through this darn thing? Why can we not just scribble down something? Arey, research question to bada easy hai. It's very easy. Just figure it out, just put something together and that becomes your research question. No, I'm sharing with you. That is why I have a whole this segment to discuss research question, how to develop and generate a good research question, because otherwise it'll be garbage in, garbage out. If your research question is garbage, your study and your findings are going to be garbage. So at this stage in the research, the infidelity, marital infidelity, right, central phenomena will be defined as, then you provide a definition of marital infidelity. What does marital infidelity mean to you? So give a definition of marital infidelity. All right. So this is a chart that is very, very useful. And again, those that are interested, as I said yesterday, in any particular PowerPoint, please reach out to me and I will individually send them to you. I don't want to blanket disseminate all my PowerPoints, okay? Because I have to be very clear that is going to specific people who are really requesting it, okay? So then purpose statement example. So what is your purpose? So, again, so this was a purpose statement. We are developing a purpose statement, folks. This is just fill in the blanks. This is a template. It is a generic template, general template for any particular research question development, right? So let me go to the purpose statement examples. So now we fill in the gaps there, right? And I'm not talking about in my previous example, I took marital infidelity, but here let's look at something different. The purpose of this study is to understand the life experiences or lived experiences of female math majors. A lot of wonderfully gifted women are amazing professors in math in India, okay? So the experiences of female math majors in an effort to understand why they chose to major in math. Now, so when you say female math majors, so students that have gone through mathematics, okay. Why did they choose math? Central phenomena, reasons females choose to major in math. We can actually shorten this also. So this is your research phenomena. Females choosing to major in math. Participants, female math majors. So who are you going to interview? You're going to interview female math majors, right? Participants, students that have majored in math. They've finished their bachelor's in math, or actually mostly master's in math or PhD in math or whatever. Unit of analysis is individual female math majors. These are participants. Location, Pleasantville University. It can be any university that you're looking at. So a university might sponsor this study, or you might be doing a doctoral research and you're seeing this emergent phenomena of female math majors, right? Purpose of this study, the second purpose, right? The purpose of the study to better understand widowed or divorced senior citizens' perceptions of online relationships websites. Now, remember, I was just talking about marital infidelity, and this is not necessarily marital infidelity, but it is to understand widowed or divorced senior citizens' perceptions of online relationships websites. So a lot of online relationships websites are forming. I don't even know which ones they are. I'm not in the market. So, but I'm sure there are some dating sites and some marital sites, Naukri. I don't know what. There are many Indian sites that have come up now. So central phenomena is perception of online relationship websites, right? Participants, widowed or divorced senior citizens, right? Because you're looking specifically for senior citizens, right? Look, unit of analysis, individual, widowed or divorced senior citizens. Location, this is implied, but it would be the location where the data were collected. It might be online. So if you're collecting data online, that is your site. If it's in a focus group, it could be a focus group online or a focus group in a physical setting. It could be through surveys. So you send out surveys to them. So you understand central phenomena is the research phenomena. I'm putting my cursor here. Participants are the people who you are going to be participating or inviting to participate in the research. Unit of analysis is individual female math majors. Pleasantville University is the university where this is being done. Okay. Defining and describing a research question. Number one, what is already known about the problem? So when you do this research question, now you've filled out that template. Now you have some understanding of what it is that you want to do. What is already known about it? Now you have to understand in order to arrive at the research, because earlier one, by the way, this was not a research question yet. This is only, what is it? A purpose statement or problem statement. Remember, in research studies, you have to put a problem statement. What is the problem? So now we are trying to figure out how to derive a research question from that statement. So step one, understand what is already known about the problem. So if it is marital infidelity or math majors or the third situation, senior citizens looking for online relationships, their perception of online websites. Step two, what specific questions do I want to answer? What is it about infidelity that you want to know? You just want somebody to define infidelity? No. What is it about in your research, marital infidelity, that excites you about the research? What are the contributions that you want to make to the extant literature? What researcher is called for in the problem area? How would you know step number 3? Okay. How would you know step number 3, folks, if you have not studied some of the literature? If you've gone through the literature, then you can identify some gaps in literature. We call them gaps in literature, right? So if you are able to identify some gaps in the literature, you can then begin to understand and formulate what might be a good research question based on any of the phenomena, math majors, infidelity, or seniors' perception of online dating sites or whatever, right? Okay, so the thing that you have to understand here is, okay, just let me just get to move this thing here because it blocks my vision here. Okay, okay. So it must be derived from the purpose statement. What should be, now we are talking about characteristics. We are getting into this research question. It should be derived from the purpose statement. Remember the purpose statement, guys, that I showed you? The purpose statement, the template in which we filled out all the details, it must be derived from that purpose statement. So there are steps, as you will see. Oh my goodness, you'll say this is Dr. Bell is making it so complicated. I thought research question was very simple. Just sit back, have a cup of coffee, and figure out a research question. No, it's not that simple. Must be derived from the purpose statement. Should be clear, concise, and focused. Clear, concise. A research question doesn't run into 3 lines or 4 sentences. It is usually one short, crisp, focused sentence. Should intrigue the researcher. If it doesn't intrigue you, if it is not exciting you, but it is actually exciting the committee or your faculty mentor more than it is exciting you, believe me, it is not a good research question. It should be exciting you. You're the researcher. You're putting your life on the line for X number of years. It should be manageable scope. So if your research question is about how many clouds are there in the sky, right? Or is it going to rain 3 times a week or 4 times a week? Okay. The second one is actually a little more doable because you can look at the weather forecast and say, okay, you know, they are saying it might rain 3 times a week. But how many clouds are in the sky? That's not a researchable question. So manageable scope, the scope, what is the scope of the research? Data can be collected. Can you collect data and analyze the data? Because if you're not going to be able to collect the data, what good is this research study? Theoretical and practical significance of that. What is the theoretical and practical significance of your research study or of your research question? Is your research question ethical? You know, sometimes people will have a research question, but it is really shady and it's not ethical. You don't want to get into dishonesty or unethical type stuff. Like an unethical research question, maybe what if I'm finding that my neighbor is amassing a lot of money, right? Right? So, but I'm poor. So maybe I should, and I know they are going out on vacation to Thailand, the whole family. Maybe I should break their lock and raid their home or their safe deposit box, take the money, and that way I get, and every time they go on vacation, I can break into their home and create merry hell for them. Is that unethical? It is dishonest. It's a crime. So your research question has to be ethical. Now, within the ethical realm, you can go into a lot of different areas. Sensitive. There was a time when I know that at least 5 to 6 years, maybe 7 years ago, India was shying away from researching LGBTQ because anytime you would bring up LGBTQ, some people would say, no, that's not ethical to discuss. I don't want to talk about it. If you want to do LGBTQ, go to some other supervisor. I'm not going to do that. Why? Because your research chair or committee chair has strong views about homosexuality. So he doesn't want to, or she doesn't want to get part of your study. But that doesn't mean that your study is unethical. It just means that you have to have the right supervisor to do it. A supervisor who will be more open, who will be more understanding, more compassionate, more with the times. Times are changing. Transgenders, right? The Hijra community. Now suddenly there's a lot of emergence of research that is going on in that community. I just wrapped up earlier this year one student who was doing her doctoral research with me from Pakistan, Islamic University or Islam, whatever, in Pakistan, on transgender motivation within Pakistan. Now, I was amazed that there was a lot of interest suddenly in understanding the plight, understanding the marginalization of the transgenders, transgender people, transgender community, transgender individuals. So it was totally ethical. So by ethics, you have to understand what I mean by ethical. Your research question should be ethical, okay? Okay, do not put the cart before the horse. Review the basic literature pertaining to the problem statement and area before developing a research question. So, as I was saying before, understand, examine, research, you look at the literature that's available on the topic. And on that, I would say that to do a literature review, just don't go and Google something. That's not a rigorous way of finding something. If you do Google Scholar, that might be rigorous. Taylor and Francis, Emerald Publishing, Sage, those are all good prized academic journals, right? Go and look for research there, not just casual articles written by people which had no support, no evidence. They're not evidence-based, they're just opinions. You have to look for research-based articles. Do not fall in love with the methodology or research design. Oh, so I've just attended participatory action research with Dr. Bell. So I'm going to definitely do, sir, I just attended the seminar. I'm only going to do participatory action research because it sounds so great, sounds so exciting. Yes, it is exciting. Yes, it's good, but sit back, understand the literature, understand the purpose statement, your problem statement, understand what research question are you asking, and then let the research question guide the choice and deployment of a particular methodology. Okay? Examples of research question. Okay, let me just do this. Okay, so examples of research question, there we go. In grounded theory. So we were talking about grounded theory yesterday. The grounded theory is about how to develop a new theory. If you're trying to understand factors, influences, etc. Why something happens in a certain way. What is guiding this process? How do we understand what is unfolding within an organization? Why are people behaving in a certain way? You might want to do a grounded theory study. In most studies, the research question directs how the study proceeds. So I was just saying your research question guides your methodology. But in grounded theory, it is the research process that generates the question. So in grounded theory, from the data, from the research process that you're following, you're actually coming up with a research question. A key characteristic of traditional grounded theory research is that the researcher enters the field of study without the narrow research questions or hypotheses common in other research. Glaser has constantly referred to the concept of emergence. So in this, as I was saying yesterday, in most other studies, you do the literature review first, and then you go into the methodology, etc., and start collecting data. In grounded theory, it's an emergent process. What do we mean by that? You are collecting data, you're doing the iteration, you're doing the back and forth, you're doing the comparative analysis. And from that, at the end, or possibly right in the midway, you start to develop a bibliography, or to start to develop the literature, because the reasoning for that is in grounded theory, you have to be highly creative to figure out, you're trying to bring a new theory. So if you've read a lot about something, you already have some preconceived notions in your mind. You may have some theoretical constructs. So you may not be able to do justice to this kind of research. So now, in more contemporary grounded theory methods, they ask you to do at least some basic readings, some basic understanding of grounded of your phenomena before you embark on a full-blown grounded theory study, because grounded theory studies take much longer time to complete than other forms of studies, okay, using other methodologies. Grounded theory question, sample question number 1. How do asylum seekers adapt to emancipation in their adopted country following internment? So now you're hearing immigration The problem of immigration, especially in the US, there's a lot of hue and cry and political parties are making, especially the Republicans are making about all the immigrants coming from South America. They're fleeing dictatorships, they're fleeing autocracies and wanting to come to America. Also in Europe, Germany took a lot of immigrants, Sweden took some immigrants, Finland took immigrants. The US has taken immigrants, but you have a little stricter control. So all of that is causing a lot of, so how do asylum seekers adapt to emancipation in their adopted country for following interment? What influences managers in private institutions to seek professional advancement? Remember, we are talking about factors, influences. How do women in developing countries establish financial independence? So how do women in India, let's say, even though it is a highly developing emergent nation, how do they go about establishing financial independence? How? So when we look at influences or factors or how something happens, we are looking at causality. What are some of the things that cause them to look for financial instability? Or what are some of the factors that facilitate their financial independence? Things of that nature. So these are just some few quick examples of research questions, particularly in grounded theory. Now, examples of research questions in phenomenology and IPA. I don't want to go over that because yesterday I already discussed this slide with you. Remember, we were talking about employee engagement. First one, how do engagement, what does engagement mean to employees? What is it like for employees to experience engagement in a virtual team? One was indirect, the other is direct. Here is lived experience, here is generic experience. The phenomena remains the same, employee engagement in both cases. Approach and or methodology, phenomenology, here we are doing IPA, which is more hermeneutic, which is interpretative. This is more transcendental, it's descriptive, where the researcher just provides the data, provides themes, but allows the reader to interpret the themes. Okay. In IPA, the researcher is actually making interpretations. So here it is indirect experience, here is direct experience. Okay. Right. Another one, how do research questions shape the design? Some of you have asked me the question, how do research questions change the methodology? This is a continuation, extension of the previous slide. So let's look at this. Example research question, number one. What are the main experiential features of being abused? What are the main experiential features of being abused? So you note the focus on common structure of abuse. Abuse, by the way, is a phenomena that you're looking at, right? It's the central research phenomena I was talking about in the previous chapter. So abuse is a experience that you're trying to research, but it's generic. What are you just asking? What does abuse mean to you? Anybody, with whether the person has had abuse or not in their life, can say something about abuse because you're reading it in the news, you're watching on TV, etc., etc. So everybody can talk about it. So you look at you reach phenomenology. How do people who have been abused make sense of it? So now you are asking for personal meaning and sense making in a particular context with a particular experience. Now you're adding a context, and you might say, how do people who have been abused make sense of it in marriage or in relationships or whatever, right? So you're adding a context there. Interpretative phenomenological analysis you would use because you're looking at direct lived experience. What sorts of story structures do people use to describe abusive events? Again, the concept that the central phenomena or the research phenomena is abuse in all cases. But note the focus on how narratives relate to sense making. So in narrative psychology or narrative inquiry, we just ask people to provide stories, provide their experiences through stories, through narratives. And through that, we try to figure out what's going on. What factors influence how people manage abuse? Note the willingness to develop at an explanatory level. So in grounded theory, we are looking at impacts, factors, influences, as I said before, right? Grounded theory. How do people talk about being abused in close relationship? Remember, see, all we are talking about the same thing, abuse, but we are asking a different question. It leads us to a different conclusion. See this? Phenomenology, interpretative phenomenology, narrative phenomenology, grounded theory, discursive psychology. Note the focus on interaction over and above content and the caution about inferring anything about anger itself. So really you're talking about relationship, what's unfolding in a relationship over and above just the content. Discursive, when we say discursive, it means rambling, where you are given so much information and you don't know how the dots are connecting. You're trying to figure out how the dots are connecting. Okay. All right. So that brings me to the end of this 2-day workshop. Okay. Again, those that have, Pranati, you'll have to look at the chat box and see how many people showed interest in the second one following this, and keep a note of that. So, but at this point in time, I'm going to open this out for a Q&A segment, because this is the final day of our workshop. Please go ahead, raise your hand if you want to say something, add something, what you like, what you did not like, what could I have done better, etc., etc. Because I'm always trying to improve and improvise on this. So Giridhar raised. Can we go to somebody other than Giridhar, because Giridhar is one that is always present. So Giridhar, just hold on, okay, for a minute, okay, if you don't mind. Anybody?
Anybody who would like to ask a question but is not able to figure out how to raise their hand, you can just start your video. That's also indication enough for me to unmute you.
Yes, yes, yes.
But just for your information, there's a reactions button at the bottom. If you go there, you should be able to raise your hand. Okay, Vishnu, since you, sorry, Reshma, why don't you go ahead? Vishnu did switch off their video.
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
Hello, sir. Good evening, sir. Sir, I am a periodontist from India, Bangalore.
Okay.
So being in the institution...
My favorite city, Bangalore. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Institution, like I'm working in a college as a reader. So
Okay.
like we will be allotting some research projects for the postgraduates. So
Okay.
like there'll be so many confusions regarding the ethical. So many questions will be asked when we are doing on the patients, especially. So, like how exactly we have to go around, like when we are regarding the ethical concern and from if we are doing on trials on the patients or something.
Yes. So what is your question?
Sir, like how to get through the ethical, like there will be an ethical committee, sir, in the like in the college.
Okay, so you're asking me specifically how to apply for and go through and have your study cleared by ethics. That is something
Yes,
you'll have to discuss with your ethics community or ethics committee in your college, because they will be the ones who will decide how to go about it. But if you're asking me generically what to put in an ethics statement or informed consent, you can contact me after the seminar and I'll be happy to send you some sort of a template on what I use for ethics. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead. Who's next?
Great. We have 2 more people raising their hands. Dr. Behel, should we? 3 actually. Why don't we go ahead with somebody who's not asked a question before?
Yes, that was my
RHC,
idea.
Yeah. Mohana and RHC, why don't one of you unmute yourselves and ask? RHC is done it. Mohana, you can go next.
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
I'm Dr. Vishwanath from Pondicherry, India.
Okay. Yes.
So my question is, could you give some more examples of a participatory action research and how to frame that participatory action research? With some
Excellent point. Actually, if you notice that I skimmed over one slide, which came up before, I believe it was this slide. Let me go there, where I was going to talk about that, but we didn't have the. No, it was in the other one. I'm sorry, it was in the previous participatory action research one. There was a study there, and I can look up that study that was done in Canada on homeless people. Okay, in the US and Canada, believe it or not, there's a tremendous hundreds and thousands of people are homeless. They're on the street. Okay, despite being such affluent countries, there's a homeless population. Okay, so how that was a really exciting participatory action study, and I'll have to look up the information on that. It may be in the box folder, I'm not sure, but I can try to identify it and I'll get back to you on that. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Mohana, why don't you go next? I've asked you to unmute yourself.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, the talk regarding the research question, the slides, everything was going smoothly, like until that grounded research slide. There was a bit not so, like the jump was not okay with that slide. I felt like that.
What was that? What was not okay? What was not okay with the slide?
Like the research question framing slides were coming in order. Like when
Yeah.
it came to the grounded theory, there was some mismatch. Like we couldn't catch up. I couldn't catch up there. Like
You mean these slides here? This one?
Yeah, this was all okay. This was all okay. We were going. It was going very well until then. Suddenly it was a grounded theory. This slide. Suddenly there was a jump to this slide. It was a bit confusing. There was no flow actually to catch the concept. Like
okay. What you're trying to say is like suddenly it went into a different. But I was just showing you examples of research questions. There was just some simple 2 or 3 examples of research questions as they apply to grounded theory. So I was just giving you generically. I was not talking about. I was talking about the grounded theory, but then I was talking about just research questions that follow from grounded theory. To give you an example of research questions.
Okay, that thing, those 2 slides were a bit not that comfortable.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. So, anybody else?
Yes, we have Padmashri. Why don't you go next? Giridhar, apologies. We'll round back to you for sure.
Yeah, hi. I am Padmashri from Mysuru, and I'm a research scholar. I'm researching on emotions and how teachers' emotions impact the students' behavior and their emotions. So before I mean, the area that I'm getting into, it involves a lot and requires a lot of qualitative research. Yes. Because emotions are extremely perceptional. So before I came into this, I mean, more than a question, this is something that that was coming into my head. So I just thought I wanted to share this. Okay. I came in to learn knowledge, as to how qualitative research is to be done and what are the concepts to be understood to do qualitative research. But as I'm listening to this, I'm getting that the researcher, as being a part of the research, not only as as somebody who is actually getting data or somebody who is doing some research, more than that, that researcher becomes a part of that whole process. Yes. When we speak of phenomenology and when we spoke about participatory action research, more than action, I'm actually seeing the being of the researcher being really, really very important. Yes. So when you speak about the phenomenology, when you speak about the phenomena external to the researcher, is important, of course, but as important as that is the phenomena that's happening inside the researcher also.
Beautifully said. You captured it much better than I would have explained it. So you have really learned something very, very critical about this, the role of the researcher, the reflexivity of the researcher, the co-creation role. You're co-creating knowledge. You're not just getting knowledge from the participants. Your study is a collaborative effort. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm just really loving. I would really want to get in now more and more.
Yeah. So why don't you get in touch with me via email, and let's take this conversation forward, and let's see how I can be of some help to you in your project that you're currently working with. Because I work with emotions all the time. Actually, to be honest with you, I wear my emotions and feelings on my sleeve all the time.
yeah.
So I'm very comfortable. Not a lot of people are very comfortable with emotions and feelings. My whole entire work is on emotions, feelings, perceptions, attitudes, because that's the part of the. But thank you so much for sharing so nicely. Okay, I appreciate it. So you be in touch with me, okay, and we'll take this forward. Okay.
Certainly, Dr. Anil. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Anybody else?
Yes, we do have Judith.
Okay.
Hello, sir. Good evening here. Sir, thank you. It was wonderful. Actually, I missed yesterday, unfortunately, but I'll go through the YouTube, which it has been posted. My question is, I'm doing my post-graduation here in Karnataka. I'm in community medicine. So I have, for my thesis, I have chosen qualitative study. It is regarding maternal mortality, why mothers are dying and why we can't reduce the number still. This is my thesis, but then my guide is asking me to make a short study of the same in a short duration with the undergraduates, like for in a week. Can we do that for a qualitative study, sir? Like focus
so
group
if the answer is yes, we can do that, but I will not be able to address fully your question here, just given that we have over the time boundary. But if you contact me directly, I will I will engage with you on that. Okay.
Sure, sir.
All
Thank
right.
you so
So
much.
we can thank you. We have time for just one or maybe two, because my next segment will be starting in about 25-30 minutes for those that have opted for it. So really quick, Dr. Professor Giridhar, or I think he raised his hand again. So why don't you go ahead and speak,
Please,
sir?
you can call me Giridhar. I'm a medical doctor, but Giridhar is totally fine.
So you can see my struggle, because sometimes what happens is when you call a doctor by their first name, they get offended.
No, it's not offended. I prefer myself to be called as a doctor. People don't have to have any, pre-notions or something in your mind when they speak with me. I'm totally comfortable being called myself by my name. So that's absolutely fine.
That's so nice of you, because that's the way I am. I'm not into titles, and I want to create an equitable environment where I tell people, don't call me sir, don't call me doctor, just call me by my first name. But thank you so much for clarifying that. So go ahead, sir. What was your question?
Yeah, I'll just have two quick questions, but really, I think something that you could probably address online or to all of the colleagues in the call. First thing is, like when you spoke about the scope and the boundary of a qualitative research.
Yes.
I mean, I feel it's actually a little challenging, because now when I'm trying to research a health system, health system has multiple direct and indirect influences. It could go into economics, it could go into social sciences, it could go into food industry, it could go into animal health. Environment and so on and so forth. So when I'm trying to elicit something, I mean, I feel that I need to just speak with the health bureaucrats, but then I may know that the water is not good, so I need to speak with the public works department, and then there was someone will say, hey, pollution is happening, so I need them to speak with the environment guys. So where do you draw the line? I mean, that's something which I'm still struggling to write in a proposal, because it's hard to define when I'm actually writing a proposal to say that, hey, this is what
I have Dr. Giridhar, I have some ideas about this. Can we take this offline and discuss it, because it seems to be a very specific situation for you, and then because we can discuss. Okay, I know know a bit more about what you're talking about. then I can
Sure.
explicate it a bit more with more clarity.
Yeah.
Right.
The other clarification I wanted was, now speaking of all the research questions and the topics, framing them and all that, it actually boils down to a very central theme, that are ethical committees in India really geared to review such kind of proposals and guide?
Yes,
So if that is
that's
the
a
case, what kind of guidelines should we follow? Because I am working in a private organization called One Health Trust, previously Center for Disease Dynamics, Economics and Policy, based in Washington as in Bangalore. So if I'm setting up a campus and you're also going to do an institute and you move research, primary, quantitative and qualitative research, I need to ask reference for the ethical committee members so that they're abreast with what is the reach.
Your voice is cutting off.
Dr. Giridharan.
Giridhar, your voice is cutting off. So why don't you take this offline with me? Okay, is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
We're unable to hear you. It's coming very distorted.
Very distorted. Yeah. So, but that's fine.
I'm so
I
sorry.
think
Actually, came for dinner, so that's the reason. I'm so sorry about it.
Hello.
No. Don't worry about it. I could hear the gist of what you were trying to say. At least we captured that, and I'll be able to address it more in detail if I get some more information from you. All right. I think on that note, I think we should. What do you say, Pranati? We should end this session because there's another following session which is supposed to be starting in about 20 minutes.
20 minutes from now.
Have people shown interest in that session?
Absolutely, we have quite some interest in that, Dr. Behel.
Okay.
So I think we're good to go. It's well past the number that we had estimated.
Yes.
So you might be looking at a slightly bigger cohort for that.
Don't worry about it. Listen, why don't you take the snapshot of the questions and all in the chat as you did yesterday, quickly, because I'm going to end this sharing right now, and right, so we can get into this. So you can take that, and we can then I can address it after the workshop, maybe today or tomorrow.
Absolutely. Okay. I've already saved the transcript. If you could give me a minute, I'll just tally that with what I have noted, but we're good to close the session for now. Just for everybody's convenience, Dr. Behel, I wanted to confirm that we'll be meeting on the same link at 10 o'clock.
Yes. We're at 10 o'clock. So give it a few minutes more, because we were originally thinking that people will have 30 minutes. Let's give them a little bit. So let's make it. So what time is it for you right now, Pranati, in India?
9:42.
9:42. How about 9:55?
Sure.
Or 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, right?
Sure.
Would 10 be okay? It'll just give me a chance to get up and take a stretch break.
Absolutely.
And everybody else also. All right. So you join on the same link and all of that, and we'll have some good time with that, because I think that you're going to love the other segment. It's really involved. If you thought this was heavy, then that's going to be like super heavy, but interesting, because it's very, very important from the standpoint of building your research proposals. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Dr. Behel, if I may suggest, and we can completely not do that. If it's the same link, we could perhaps all just switch off our videos and mute ourselves, and just whoever wants to leave can leave. Whoever wants to stay can just stay put.
Why didn't I think of that? That is so good. That is amazing. Yeah,
we can stop. Exactly.
So
we can stop recording now, so that there are two different recording pieces.
Yes. I'm going to stop recording this. So can I end this session then?
No, so just stop recording.
Oh, stop recording.
And,
pause.
Yes, and you can stop your video, stop your audio, and relax.
Okay.
Till
So
whenever
before I stop the recording, thank you so much for everybody's amazing interaction and attention and participation over the last 2 days. It was just absolutely mind-boggling. And again, I'm always running behind because I've got so much to share and so little time to share it in. But that's why I did this makeup session. It wasn't by design, it was impromptu. I said, I'm going to at least provide you an hour-long session on building research proposals, because that is something you're going to enjoy. So with that, thank you so much. Have a good evening. For those that are joining, again, welcome aboard. I'll be with you in about 15-20 minutes. And those that are leaving, goodbye and good luck. And please feel free to keep in touch. I really do mean this. Feel free to reach out to me personally, and I'll be very happy to work with you, okay, on any issues or concerns that you might have. Okay, so I'm going to pause this recording right now.